In the quiet town of Dagenham, Essex, England, there's a story that has haunted a community for decades. It's a story about two little girls, twin sisters, who disappeared without a trace. It's a story about a mother's unending search, about unanswered questions, and about a mystery that continues to baffle investigators even today. This is the story of Charlene Lunnon and Lisa Hoodless, twin girls who were just 3 years old when they vanished on the evening of November 9th, 1969. Over 55 years have passed since that night, yet their disappearance remains one of Britain's most enduring missing persons cases. What happened to these two little girls? Where did they go? And why, despite extensive investigations, numerous appeals, and the tireless efforts of their family, has no trace of them ever been found? As we explore this case, we'll journey back to late 1960s Britain, examine the circumstances surrounding their disappearance, follow the investigation through the decades, and try to understand how two children could simply vanish from their home without anyone knowing what became of them. This is a story about loss, about hope that refuses to die, and about questions that still demand answers more than half a century later. To understand this case, we need to understand the world these twins were born into. The year was 1966 when Charlene Lunnon and Lisa Hoodless came into the world. They were born on March 29, 1966, in Dagenham, a working-class town in East London, part of the London borough of Barking and Dagenham. Dagenham in the 1960s was a bustling community. The Ford Motor Company had a massive manufacturing plant there, which employed thousands of local residents. It was the kind of place where everyone seemed to know everyone else, where neighbors looked out for each other, where children played in the streets while their parents watched from doorsteps and windows. The twins were born to their mother, Pauline Lunnon. Life wasn't always easy for Pauline. She was a young mother trying to provide for her children in an era when single mothers faced significant social stigma and economic challenges. Charlene and Lisa were identical twins, which meant they looked remarkably similar. Those who knew them said it was sometimes difficult to tell them apart. They had the same facial features, the same mannerisms, the bond that twins often share, a connection that goes beyond ordinary sibling relationships. By all accounts, they were beautiful little girls. Photographs from that time show two small children with bright eyes and sweet smiles. They were 3 years old in 1969, at that age of wonder and discovery, when everything is new and the world seems full of possibilities. The twins lived with their mother in Dagenham. Their home was modest, like most in the area. These were council estates and working-class neighborhoods where families made do with what they had, where community mattered, where people helped each other through difficult times. Britain in the late 1960s was experiencing significant social change. The post-war period was giving way to new cultural movements. Music, fashion, attitudes, everything was evolving. But in places like Dagenham, life still moved at a steadier pace. People went to work, raised their families, and lived their lives within the rhythms of their communities. For Pauline and her twins, life had its challenges but also its moments of joy. Watching Charlene and Lisa grow, seeing them develop their personalities, hearing their laughter, these were the precious moments that any parent treasures. But beneath the surface of this ordinary life, there were struggles. Pauline faced difficulties that many single mothers of that era encountered. Financial pressures, social judgment, the constant challenge of providing for two young children. The social services of the time operated differently than they do today. There was less support, less understanding, fewer resources available to struggling families. When families encountered difficulties, the solutions offered weren't always in the best interest of keeping families together. And this is where our story takes a turn that would lead to heartbreak. In 1969, The twins were placed into foster care. The exact circumstances that led to this decision are complex, involving both Pauline's difficult situation and the social services protocols of the time. Foster care in 1960s Britain was a system designed to help children whose parents were temporarily unable to care for them. The idea was that children would be placed with suitable families who would look after them until their parents could provide for them again. For Pauline, this placement wasn't meant to be permanent. It was supposed to be temporary, a way to ensure the twins were cared for while she worked to improve her circumstances. The expectation was that once she was more stable, the girls would come home. The twins were placed with foster carers in the Dagenham area. These were people who had been approved by the local authority to care for children. They were supposed to provide a safe, nurturing environment. Being separated from their mother must have been confusing for Charlene and Lisa. At 3 years old, they were old enough to understand that something had changed, that they weren't with their mummy anymore, but too young to fully comprehend why. Twin bonds are particularly strong. Research has shown that twins, especially identical twins, often have a unique connection. They've been together since before birth, developing side by side. Having each other during this difficult time would have been important. At least they weren't separated from each other. The foster care system of that era operated with less oversight than modern systems. There were fewer checks, fewer visits, less monitoring. Once children were placed with foster carers, there was an assumption that everything was proceeding appropriately. Pauline was working toward getting her daughters back. She was doing what was required of her, meeting with social workers, trying to demonstrate that she could provide a stable home. For a mother separated from her children, every day must have felt like an eternity. Visits were arranged so Pauline could see the twins. These visits were precious moments, a chance to hold her daughters, to see how they were growing, to maintain that crucial bond between mother and child. But visits are no substitute for being together as a family. For the twins, these visits might have been confusing, seeing their mother but then having to say goodbye again. Returning to the foster home instead of going home with her. The foster carers were supposed to be caring for the twins properly, ensuring they were fed, clothed, safe, and happy. They were supposed to be facilitating the relationship between Pauline and her daughters. Understanding that this was meant to be a temporary arrangement, social workers were supposed to be monitoring the situation, checking on the twins regularly, ensuring the placement was working well, helping Pauline work toward reunification. But somewhere in this system, something went terribly wrong. As the months passed, Pauline continued working toward bringing her daughters home. She had no reason to believe anything was amiss. The system was functioning as it was supposed to, or so she thought. November 9, 1969, started like any other day. It was late autumn in England. The days were getting shorter, the weather was turning cold. Darkness came early at that time of year. The twins were still with their foster carers. They had been in foster care for several months by this point. Pauline was still working toward reunification, still hoping to bring her daughters home soon. What exactly happened that evening has never been fully clear. The details are sparse, which is part of what makes this case so troubling. According to what would later be reported, the twins were at the foster home on the evening of November 9th. They went to bed that night, just as they had every night before. But at some point during that night or early the next morning, they disappeared. When and how this happened remains one of the central mysteries of the case. Were they taken during the night while others in the house slept? Did something happen earlier in the evening? The timeline has never been precisely established. What we know is that by the morning of November 10th, Charlene and Lisa were gone. The discovery of their disappearance raises immediate questions. Who first noticed they were missing? What time was it? What was the immediate response? In any missing children case, the first hours are absolutely critical. The sooner law enforcement is notified, the sooner a search can begin, the better the chances of finding the children safe and well. But here's where this case takes a disturbing turn. The disappearance wasn't reported to police immediately. In fact, the police weren't notified for days. Some reports suggest it was even longer than that. This delay is one of the most troubling aspects of the entire case. Why wasn't the disappearance reported right away? What explanation could possibly justify not immediately contacting the authorities when 2-3-year-old children go missing? Different accounts have emerged over the years about what the foster carers said happened. Some reports suggest they claimed the twins had been collected by their mother. Others suggest different explanations were offered, but Pauline hadn't collected her daughters. She didn't have them. She didn't know they were missing. Think about this for a moment. 2 little girls disappear from their foster home, and nobody tells their mother. The people who were supposed to be caring for them, protecting them, don't immediately sound the alarm. When Pauline eventually learned that her daughters were missing, her world must have shattered. The children she had been working so hard to bring home, the daughters she loved and missed every day, were gone, and crucial time had already been lost. When the Metropolitan Police were finally notified about the missing twins, they launched an investigation immediately. But they were already working at a significant disadvantage. The trail was already cold. In missing persons cases, especially involving young children, every hour matters. The first 24 to 48 hours are crucial. After that, the chances of finding the missing person safe and well decrease significantly. By the time police were brought in, days had passed. Whatever evidence might have existed, whatever witnesses might have seen something, whatever trail might have led to the twins, all of that had gone cold. The police began with the basics, interviewing the foster carers, trying to establish exactly when the twins were last seen, attempting to create a timeline of events. The foster carers' account of what happened would have been scrutinized carefully. Were their stories consistent? Did they make sense? Were there any contradictions or unexplained elements? Police would have searched the foster home thoroughly. When children go missing, investigators look for any sign of what might have happened. They check every room, every closet, every possible space. They look for evidence of an intruder, signs of a struggle, anything that might provide a clue. They would have interviewed neighbors. Did anyone see anything unusual on the night of November 9th or the morning of November 10th? Did anyone notice strangers in the area? Were there any suspicious vehicles? Did anyone hear anything? In a community like Dagenham, where people knew their neighbors, you'd expect that if something unusual had happened, someone would have noticed. The investigation would have looked at all possible scenarios. Could the twins have wandered off on their own? At 3 years old, this seems unlikely. 3-year-olds can't get very far on their own, especially 2 of them together. And where would they have gone? How would they have left the house without anyone noticing? Could someone have taken them? This raises the question of who would have had access to the foster home, who could have entered and left with 2 children without raising alarm. Could the foster carers themselves have been involved in the disappearance? This is a question that investigators would have had to consider, however uncomfortable it might have been. Police appeals were made to the public. Information was released about the missing twins, descriptions, photographs, details of when and where they were last seen. The hope was that someone, somewhere, had seen something that could help. Local newspapers covered the story. The Evening Standard, local Dagenham papers, they all reported on the missing twins. The story was heartbreaking. 2 3-year-old sisters vanished from their foster home, their mother desperately seeking answers. Searches were conducted in the local area. Police officers, volunteers, community members, They combed through parks, vacant lots, waterways, any area where the children might have wandered or where someone might have taken them. The River Thames wasn't far from Dagenham. Waterways are always a concern in missing persons cases involving children. Search teams would have checked along the riverbanks and waterfront areas. But despite all these efforts, no trace of Charlene and Lisa was found. No witnesses came forward with credible sightings. No physical evidence was discovered. No leads developed that led anywhere conclusive. It was as if the twins had simply vanished into thin air. For Pauline, this must have been torture. Not knowing what had happened to her daughters, wondering if they were safe, if they were scared, if they were calling for her. The not knowing is perhaps the cruelest aspect of cases like this. When children disappear without a trace, investigators and the public inevitably develop theories about what might have happened. In the case of Charlene and Lisa, several possibilities have been considered over the decades. Theory 1. Illegal adoption. One theory that has persisted is that the twins might have been given up for illegal adoption. In the 1960s and 70s, there were documented cases of children being placed with families outside of legal channels. Could the foster carers have arranged for the twins to be placed with another family? Perhaps a couple who wanted children but couldn't adopt through legal means. Perhaps someone who was willing to pay for a child. This theory would explain why the twins disappeared without a trace. They would have been taken to a new home, possibly even given new identities, raised by people who wanted children of their own. If this happened, Charlene and Lisa might have grown up never knowing they were the missing twins from Dagenham. They might have lived their entire lives under different names, unaware of their true identity, unaware that their biological mother never stopped searching for them. This theory is particularly poignant because it means the twins could still be alive today. They would be in their late 50s now. They might have families of their own. They might be living ordinary lives, completely unaware of their extraordinary story. But for this theory to be true, it would require a conspiracy of silence that has lasted over 50 years. The foster carers, the adoptive parents, anyone who facilitated such an arrangement, they would all have had to keep this secret for decades. Theory 2. Someone took them. Another possibility is that someone outside the foster care system took the twins. This could have been a stranger abduction, though such cases involving two children simultaneously are rare. Could someone have been watching the house, waiting for an opportunity? Could they have known the layout of the home, known when the children would be vulnerable? Twin girls might have been particularly attractive targets to someone with specific motivations. The fact that there were two of them, that they looked alike, adds a disturbing dimension to this theory. If this theory is correct, the outcome is more difficult to contemplate. Cases of child abduction by strangers rarely end well, particularly when the children are as young as Charlene and Lisa were. Theory 3. The foster carers' involvement. This is perhaps the most troubling theory to consider, but investigators would have had to examine it. Could the foster carers themselves have been involved in the twins' disappearance? The delay in reporting the disappearance is deeply suspicious. Why wouldn't you immediately call the police when two children in your care go missing? What possible reason could justify that delay? The explanations reportedly given by the foster carers, that someone had collected the twins, or other accounts that varied over time, raise serious questions. If the foster carers were involved, what could have motivated them? Was it something that happened accidentally that they then tried to cover up? Was it something more deliberate? This theory is uncomfortable to consider, but in cases where children disappear from the care of specific individuals, those individuals must be carefully scrutinized. Theory 4. They're still out there. Perhaps the most hopeful theory is that Charlene and Lisa are still alive somewhere, living under different identities, unaware of their true origins. This might seem far-fetched, But there have been cases where people discovered in adulthood that their entire life story was false, that they had been taken or given away as children. DNA technology has helped solve some of these cases in recent years. People who grew up with one identity have discovered their true biological families through DNA testing services. Could Charlene and Lisa be out there right now, living their lives, never knowing that their biological mother spent decades searching for them? Could they be among the millions of people who have taken DNA tests for genealogy purposes, unknowingly creating the possibility of finally solving this mystery? For Pauline Lunnon, the disappearance of her daughters began a journey of searching that would last the rest of her life. Imagine the guilt she must have felt. She had placed her daughters in foster care, trusting the system to keep them safe until she could provide for them again. And now they were gone. Parents in such situations often blame themselves, even when the situation was beyond their control. Pauline might have thought, if only I had been able to keep them with me, if only I had fought harder against the foster placement, if only I had visited more often, if only I had somehow known something was wrong. But none of what happened was her fault. She was a mother doing her best in difficult circumstances, working within a system that was supposed to help families, not tear them apart. Pauline refused to give up hope. Even as years passed without any news, without any leads, without any sign of what had happened to Charlene and Lisa, she continued to believe that one day she would find her daughters. She participated in appeals for information. Whenever there was media interest in the case, whenever police conducted reviews of the investigation, she was there, pleading for anyone with information to come forward. "Please," she would say, "if you know anything about what happened to my girls, please tell someone. They were just 3 years old when they disappeared. They're my daughters and I've never stopped looking for them. The pain of not knowing is a particular kind of torment. If you know what happened to someone you love, even if the news is the worst possible, at least you know. You can grieve, you can have closure, you can find a way to move forward. But when you don't know, when there are no answers, no resolution, no closure, you're left in a permanent state of limbo. You can't fully grieve because you don't know if there's something to grieve. You can't move forward because part of you is always frozen in that moment when everything changed." Pauline aged, but the twins in her mind remained frozen at 3 years old. She had photographs from before they went into foster care, precious images of her baby girls, smiling, playing, living their short lives with her. As decades passed, she would have tried to imagine what they might look like as they grew older. What would they look like as teenagers? As adults, would they look like her? Would they have her mannerisms, her voice? She celebrated their birthdays every year, March 29th. Every year that date would come around, marking another year that her daughters had been missing, another year older they would have been. At 5 years old, they would have been starting school. At 10, they would have been in primary school, making friends, learning, growing. At 16, they would have been teenagers with all the complexity and wonder of that age. At 21, they would have been adults, making their own way in the world. Every milestone they would have reached, Pauline would have thought about. Every Mother's Day, every Christmas, every ordinary day, she would have thought about her missing daughters. Did Pauline ever allow herself to imagine that they might be alive somewhere, happy, safe? Did she dare to hope that perhaps they had been taken by someone who wanted children, someone who would raise them with love and care? Or did the darker possibilities haunt her? The thoughts that any parent would have in such circumstances, the fear about what might have happened, the worry that they might have suffered, the awful not knowing. Support for families of missing persons has improved over the decades, but in the early years after Charlene and Lisa disappeared, there was less support available. Pauline would have had to navigate her grief and her ongoing search largely on her own. The psychological impact of having a missing child is profound and lasting. Studies have shown that parents of missing children experience ongoing trauma, a kind of grief that's been described as frozen or ambiguous. You can't complete the grieving process because there's no resolution. Pauline's life became intertwined with her search. Every knock at the door might bring news. Every phone call might be the one that finally provided answers. Every new development in forensic technology or investigative techniques offered a new possibility for solving the case. As the 1970s became the 1980s, then the 1990s, then the 2000s, the case of the missing twins remained unsolved. It became what investigators call a cold case, a case where all active leads have been exhausted, where the investigation has stalled despite best efforts. Cold cases don't mean forgotten cases. Police files remained open. The case was never officially closed, but without new leads, without new evidence, without witnesses coming forward, there wasn't much active investigation happening. Technology changed dramatically during these decades. DNA analysis became available in the 1980s and became increasingly sophisticated over time. Computerized databases allowed better tracking and cross-referencing of information. The internet created new possibilities for spreading information about missing persons. Each new technological advance offered hope that perhaps this would be the breakthrough that finally solved the case. Could DNA evidence that couldn't be analyzed in 1969 now provide answers? Could new investigative techniques reveal something that had been missed? Police conducted periodic reviews of the case. This is standard practice with cold cases. Every so many years, a fresh set of eyes looks at all the evidence, the witness statements, the investigation records to see if something was missed. If new technology could be applied, if a different perspective might reveal something new. The Metropolitan Police Missing Persons Unit maintained the case file. They kept the evidence that had been gathered. They preserved the photographs of the twins. They maintained records of everything that was known about the case. Other missing children cases that occurred around the same time period were compared to this case. Were there similarities? Could the same person or people have been involved in multiple disappearances? Investigators looked at other cases of children who had disappeared from foster care. Were there patterns? Were there connections to the Lunnon Hoodless case? During this time, there were occasionally reported sightings. Someone would contact police, saying they had seen someone who looked like the twins, might have looked at a particular age. Each of these reports was investigated, but none led to finding Charlene and Lisa. The foster carers who had been caring for the twins were interviewed multiple times over the years. Their story was examined and re-examined. Were there inconsistencies? Were there details that changed or evolved over time? Without being able to share specific details that might violate legal protections, we can say that investigators clearly had questions about the circumstances surrounding the disappearance and the delay in reporting it. But questions aren't the same as proof. Suspicion isn't the same as evidence. And without evidence, without witnesses, without proof of what happened, the case remained frustratingly unsolved. The media would occasionally revisit the case. Anniversaries of the disappearance, the 10th, 20th, 30th, 40th years, would prompt newspaper articles and sometimes television coverage. These media appeals served an important purpose. They kept the case in the public consciousness. They reminded people that these children were still missing, that their family still wanted answers. And they reached new generations who might have information they didn't realize was relevant. Someone out there knows what happened to Charlene and Lisa. Whether they were directly involved or whether they have knowledge passed down from someone else, somewhere someone holds the key to solving this mystery. The question is, will they ever come forward?
Nothing to be scared of. You're not going to get told off. No one's going to get angry with you. Just come home.
Yesterday was a normal school morning. She says, I'm going to school now. Bye, Mum. Bye, Dad. I'll see you later. And that was it.
To better understand the Lunnon Hoodless case, it's helpful to look at similar cases from the same era. The 1960s and 70s saw a number of missing children cases in the UK, some of which were eventually solved, others which remain mysteries to this day. The social services system of that era operated differently than modern systems. There was less oversight, less monitoring, fewer checks and balances. Children could move through the system with less documentation than would be required today. There have been documented cases from that period where children in care were moved, placed, or adopted through irregular channels. Some of these situations were eventually uncovered decades later. In some cases, children who disappeared from foster care were later found to have been placed with other families without proper legal procedures. The children grew up not knowing their true identity, not knowing they had been reported missing, not knowing their biological families were searching for them. These cases offer some hope that Charlene and Lisa might still be alive. If they were placed with another family in 1969, they would now be adults in their late 50s. They might have children and grandchildren of their own. They might be living ordinary lives, completely unaware that they are the missing twins from Dagenham. But how would they ever discover the truth? This is where modern DNA technology offers possibilities that didn't exist for most of the time the twins have been missing. DNA databases and genealogy websites have revolutionized the search for missing persons and the identification of unknown individuals. People who were adopted or who have questions about their origins can submit DNA samples that are compared against databases of missing persons. There have been remarkable cases in recent years where missing persons from decades ago were identified through DNA matches. People who thought they knew their family history discovered that their origins were completely different from what they'd been told. Could Charlene or Lisa, if they're still alive, unknowingly hold the key to solving their own case? If either of them has submitted DNA to a genealogy service, if either of them has ever wondered about their origins or family history, that DNA could potentially be matched to their biological family. The challenge is that they would need to have some reason to question their origins. If they were placed with a family as toddlers and raised believing those were their biological parents, why would they ever think to investigate further? Unless they had some indication that something in their story didn't add up. Maybe adoption papers that showed a different birth date. Maybe family resemblances that didn't quite match. Maybe stories that changed or didn't make sense. Maybe they were told they were adopted, but given false information about their biological family. Looking at patterns in other cases from that era, we see that children who disappeared from care sometimes vanished during transitions, when they were being moved from one placement to another, when there were gaps in supervision, when record-keeping was incomplete. The fact that two children disappeared simultaneously is unusual. Most missing children cases involve a single child. Having twins disappear together either means they were taken by someone who specifically wanted both of them, or it means whatever happened was something that affected both children at the same time. This detail has always been significant in the case. It narrows the possibilities in some ways while raising troubling questions in others. As we moved into the 2000s and 2010s, renewed attention was given to historical missing persons cases. Advances in forensic science, changes in investigative techniques, and new technology all created opportunities to re-examine cold cases. The Metropolitan Police, like many police forces, created specialized cold case units. These teams focus specifically on unsolved historical cases, applying modern methods to old evidence. The Lunnon Hoodless case was among those reviewed. Investigators looked at all the historical evidence with fresh eyes and modern understanding. DNA analysis became a crucial tool. If there were any physical evidence from the case, clothing, personal items, anything that might contain DNA, it could now be analyzed in ways that were impossible in 1969. Digital record-keeping made it easier to cross-reference information. Details that might have seemed unconnected in 1969 could now be compared against vast databases of information. Social media and the internet created new ways to spread information about missing persons. Photographs of Charlene and Lisa as they were in 1969 could be digitally age-progressed to show what they might look like decades later. Age progression imaging is a fascinating forensic technique. Specialists use computer software combined with understanding of how faces age, how genetics influence aging patterns, and how environmental factors affect appearance to create images showing what a missing child might look like at various ages. Images were created showing what Charlene and Lisa might look like as adults. These images were circulated through media appeals, posted online, shared on missing persons' websites. The hope was that someone, somewhere, might recognize these age-progressed images. Maybe the twins themselves, if they were still alive and happened to see the images. Maybe someone who knew them, who might realize that the woman they knew had a history she wasn't aware of. Pauline Lunnon participated in these modern appeals when she was able. She appeared in television documentaries about missing persons. She gave interviews to journalists. She never stopped hoping that publicity might lead to a breakthrough. "If my daughters are out there somewhere," she would say, "I want them to know that I never stopped looking for them. I want them to know that I love them and I've thought about them every single day since they disappeared." It's hard to imagine the strength it took to continue hoping, to continue searching. Year after year, decade after decade, without any answers. In 2017, there was renewed media attention on the case. The BBC and other outlets covered the story, bringing it to a new generation of viewers. The age-progressed images were widely circulated. Appeals were made for anyone with information to come forward. The investigation remained active, with police still willing to follow up on any credible leads or information. They encouraged anyone who might have knowledge about what happened to contact them, assuring that information could be provided anonymously if necessary. One of the challenges in historical cases like this is that witnesses and potential sources of information age and pass away. People who might have known something in 1969 might no longer be alive to share that information. This creates a sense of urgency. The longer the case remains unsolved, the fewer potential witnesses remain. The clock is ticking, not just for the resolution of the case, but for the possibility of getting answers from those who might have knowledge. The disappearance of Charlene and Lisa, along with other cases from that era, led to significant changes in how children in care are monitored and protected in the United Kingdom. The foster care system of the 1960s, as we've discussed, operated with less oversight than modern systems. Children could be placed with families, and as long as there were no obvious problems, there might be limited follow-up. The idea that two children could disappear from a foster home, and that their disappearance could go unreported for days was shocking. It revealed serious flaws in the system designed to protect vulnerable children. Over the decades since Charlene and Lisa disappeared, child protection systems have been reformed multiple times. Each reform was often prompted by a tragic case that revealed systemic failures. Modern foster care in the UK involves much more rigorous monitoring. Social workers are required to visit children in care regularly. Foster carers are more thoroughly vetted and trained. Record keeping is much more detailed and centralized. Children in care today have more protections than children did in 1969. There are more checks and balances, more oversight, more accountability. But the question remains, are these protections enough? Despite all the reforms and improvements, children still sometimes fall through the cracks of the system. Cases of children being harmed while in care still occur, though hopefully less frequently than in the past. The legacy of Charlene and Lisa is, in part, the changes made to prevent similar tragedies. Every child who is safer because of improved protections is, in a sense, a testament to the importance of learning from past failures. Beyond the specific changes to foster care systems, their case has contributed to broader awareness about missing children. In 1969, there wasn't the same level of public awareness or immediate response to missing children that exists today. Initiatives like the Child Rescue Alert System, similar to Amber Alerts in other countries, mean that when a child goes missing, information can be disseminated to the public immediately. The public becomes part of the search effort, with thousands of eyes looking for the missing child. None of these systems existed in 1969. When Charlene and Lisa disappeared, there was no immediate public alert, no coordinated response, no system for rapidly spreading information about missing children. The National Crime Agency's Missing Persons Unit now maintains a comprehensive database of missing persons going back decades. This allows for better tracking, better analysis of patterns, better coordination between different police forces. Charities focused on missing persons, like the Missing People charity, provide support to families and work to keep cases in the public eye. They ensure that even cold cases don't get forgotten, that families don't have to navigate their grief and their search alone. Pauline Lunnon continued her search for her daughters throughout her life. As she aged, as years turned into decades, her determination never wavered. She gave interviews whenever media outlets were interested in covering the case. She participated in documentaries about missing persons. She cooperated with police reviews of the case. She did everything she could to keep her daughter's disappearance in the public consciousness. The emotional toll of living with such uncertainty for so many years is difficult to imagine. Every parent's worst nightmare is something happening to their child. Pauline lived that nightmare not for days or weeks, but for decades. Did she allow herself to imagine happy scenarios? Did she picture her daughters living good lives somewhere, perhaps with families who loved them, even if those families didn't know the truth about their origins? Or was she haunted by darker possibilities? Did she lie awake at night wondering if her daughters had suffered, if they had been afraid, if they had called for her? The questions without answers would have been relentless. What happened that night? Where did they go? Are they alive? Are they together? Do they remember me? Do they know I never stopped looking for them? As Pauline grew older, she must have wondered if she would ever get answers in her lifetime. Would she die without knowing what happened to Charlene and Lisa? Would she go to her grave with these questions still unanswered? This is one of the cruelest aspects of cases like this, the possibility that those who loved the missing person most might never know the truth. Pauline Lunnon sadly passed away in 2018, nearly 50 years after her daughters disappeared. She died without ever knowing what happened to Charlene and Lisa. Her death was noted in news coverage of the case, with articles remembering her as a mother who never gave up hope, who spent her entire life searching for her missing daughters. In her final years, she had expressed hope that DNA technology might finally solve the mystery. She had participated in DNA testing, hoping that one day there might be a match that would lead to her daughters, but that match never came during her lifetime. The tragedy of Pauline's story is layered. She lost her daughters once when they went into foster care, a temporary separation that was supposed to end with reunification. She lost them again when they disappeared. And she lost them a third time when she died without ever knowing their fate. Her story is a reminder of the enduring nature of a mother's love. Despite decades without answers, despite the statistical improbability of resolution, despite every reason to give up hope, she never did. Even in death, Pauline's legacy continues. Her story, her determination, her refusal to let her daughters be forgotten, all of this keeps the case alive, keeps people aware that Charlene and Lisa are still missing, keeps the pressure on for answers. As we approach 2025, over 55 years have passed since Charlene Lunnon and Lisa Hoodless disappeared. The case remains officially unsolved. The Metropolitan Police still maintains the case file. They still encourage anyone with information to come forward. They still consider it an active investigation, though without new leads, there's limited active work being done. If Charlene and Lisa are still alive, they would be 58 years old now. They could be anywhere in the world. They might be living ordinary lives, completely unaware that they are missing persons. The age-progressed images showing what they might look like as adults have been circulated widely. These images are based on photographs from when they were 3 years old, combined with genetic factors and aging science. Of course, these images are educated guesses. People age in different ways, influenced by genetics, lifestyle, environment, health. The twins might look exactly like these age-progressed images, or they might look quite different, but the images serve an important purpose. They make it possible for people to imagine what the twins might look like now, rather than being frozen in time as 3-year-olds. DNA technology continues to advance. New databases are created. More people submit their DNA for genealogy purposes. Each new submission to a DNA database creates another possibility for a match that might solve a missing person's case. Forensic genealogy, the use of DNA and genealogical research to identify unknown individuals or solve cold cases, has been responsible for solving numerous historical cases in recent years. This technique could potentially be applied to the Lunnon Hoodless case if the right circumstances aligned. The challenge is that there needs to be DNA to compare. If Charlene or Lisa, or their biological children, if they had any, were to submit DNA to a genealogy service, and if police have DNA from biological family members to compare against, a match could potentially be made. Social media has created new possibilities for spreading information about missing persons. Facebook groups dedicated to missing persons, Twitter threads about cold cases, YouTube videos examining unsolved mysteries. All of these keep cases like this in the public consciousness. There are online communities of amateur investigators who research cold cases, looking for new angles, new connections, new possibilities, while police investigations remain the official authority. These community efforts sometimes uncover information that proves useful. The case has been featured in various true crime media over the years: podcasts, YouTube videos, television documentaries, newspaper articles. Each time the case is covered, it reaches new audiences who might have information they don't realize is relevant. After more than 5 decades without resolution, it's worth revisiting the main theories about what happened to Charlene and Lisa. The illegal adoption theory, revisited, this remains one of the more hopeful theories. If the twins were placed with another family illegally, they could be alive and well, living ordinary lives. In the decades since 1969, there have been documented cases of people discovering in adulthood that they were adopted illegally or under false pretenses. Sometimes this discovery came through DNA testing for genealogy. Sometimes it came from deathbed confessions or discovered documents. If Charlene and Lisa were given to another family, several scenarios are possible. They might have been raised knowing they were adopted, but given false information about their biological family and origins. They might believe their birth mother died or gave them up willingly, not knowing they were actually missing children. They might have been raised believing the adoptive family was their biological family. If they were young enough when placed, they might have no memories of their life before. Without reason to question their origins, they might never have investigated. They might have been separated and placed with different families. While they were twins and likely bonded, someone arranging illegal placements might have found it easier to place them separately. The challenge with this theory is the conspiracy of silence it requires. The foster carers, if they arranged it, the adoptive families, anyone who facilitated the placement, all would have had to keep the secret for over 50 years. People do keep secrets, even terrible ones, for entire lifetimes. But as people age, as they face mortality, some decide to clear their conscience. Deathbed confessions have solved cold cases before. Is it possible that somewhere, someone knows what happened and has been carrying that knowledge for decades? Absolutely. Will they ever come forward? That's the question that continues to haunt this case. The abduction theory revisited the possibility that someone outside the foster care system took the twins has always been considered. Though it raises difficult questions. Why would someone specifically target these twins? How would they have known about them? How would they have accessed the foster home? Child abduction by strangers is, thankfully, relatively rare. When it does occur, it's usually opportunistic. Someone sees a vulnerable child and acts impulsively. But taking two children simultaneously from a home requires planning. It requires knowledge of the home's layout, the routine, when people would be asleep or distracted. This theory becomes even more troubling when you consider the outcomes of stranger abductions. They rarely end well, particularly with very young children. If this theory is correct, it's likely that Charlene and Lisa are not alive today. This is the darkest possibility, the one that's hardest to contemplate. The foster care theory, revisited the involvement of the foster carers, remains a central question in this case. The delay in reporting the disappearance is deeply suspicious and has never been adequately explained. Could something have happened to the twins while in the foster carer's care? Could there have been an accident or incident that was then covered up? Could the foster carers have arranged for the twins to be taken elsewhere, either for profit or for other reasons? The investigation clearly looked at these possibilities, but without evidence or confession, it's impossible to know definitively what role, if any, the foster carers played in the disappearance. Over 50 years later, those who were involved in caring for the twins in 1969 may no longer be alive. If they held secrets, those secrets may have died with them. Or perhaps someone who knows something, who has carried this burden, is still alive and still capable of providing answers. Beyond the investigation, beyond the theories and possibilities, this case is fundamentally about human loss and suffering. Charlene and Lisa were real little girls. They were 3 years old, at that age of wonder and curiosity, when every day brings new discoveries. They had their whole lives ahead of them. Whatever happened to them, they were too young to understand it, too young to protect themselves, too young to have any control over their fate. Pauline was a mother who loved her daughters. She was working to provide a better life for them, trying to get through difficult times so she could bring them home. Instead, she lost them forever and spent the rest of her life searching. The grief of losing a child is profound. But the grief of not knowing what happened to your child, of never having closure, of spending decades wondering if they're alive or suffering or calling for you, that's a special kind of torture. Pauline died without answers. She never got to hold her daughters again. She never got to see what they looked like as they grew up. She never got to know if they thought about her, if they remembered her, if they knew she never stopped looking for them. If Charlene and Lisa are alive somewhere, they've lived their entire lives not knowing their true story. They've missed out on knowing their biological mother, on understanding where they came from. They would have siblings they've never met, extended family they don't know exists. They would have a mother who loved them and searched for them until her dying day. If they're not alive, then two little girls lost their lives far too young, and their mother spent 50 years searching for them without ever knowing they were gone. There's no happy version of this story. Even the most optimistic scenario, that the twins are alive and well, still involves decades of separation, a mother who died without knowing what happened, and twins who never knew their true identity. The foster care system failed these children. The people responsible for protecting them failed. The investigation, despite the best efforts of many dedicated professionals, failed to find answers. Somewhere along the way, decisions were made, actions were taken or not taken, that resulted in two little girls disappearing without a trace. If Charlene Lunnon and Lisa Hoodless are alive somewhere, what would we want them to know? First, you were loved. Your mother, Pauline, loved you deeply. She never stopped looking for you. She thought about you every single day. She celebrated your birthdays every year. She never gave up hope of finding you. Second, what happened wasn't your fault. You were just 3 years old. You had no control over what happened to you. Whatever circumstances led to your disappearance, they weren't your doing. Third, you have a story worth knowing. If you've ever felt like something in your past didn't quite add up, if you've ever wondered about your origins, if you've ever had questions about your early childhood, those feelings might be important. Fourth, it's not too late for answers. Even after 55 years, even after Pauline has passed away, your story matters. There are family members who would want to know you. There are investigators who want to solve this case. There are people who have been wondering what happened to you for decades. If you've taken a DNA test for genealogy purposes, or if you're considering doing so, that simple action could solve one of Britain's longest-running missing persons cases. If you were born on March 29, 1966, if you're a twin, if you have any reason to question the story you were told about your early childhood, if you grew up in a situation that seemed unusual, these might be clues worth investigating. Fifth, you deserved better. You deserve to grow up knowing your true identity. You deserve to know your mother. You deserve to have your story told honestly. The fact that you didn't get these things isn't a reflection on your worth. It's a reflection on the failures of systems and people who should have protected you. And finally, your mother never forgot you. Even though Pauline has passed away, her love for you remains part of your story. She was a mother who did everything she could to find her daughters. That love doesn't disappear just because she's gone. The disappearance of Charlene Lunnon and Lisa Hoodless remains one of Britain's most enduring mysteries. For over 55 years, their fate has been unknown. Two little girls, just 3 years old, vanished from a foster home in Dagenham in November 1969. Despite investigations, appeals, advances in technology, and decades of searching, no one knows what happened to them. Their mother, Pauline, spent her entire life looking for them. She died in 2018 without ever knowing their fate, without ever getting the answers she desperately sought. The questions remain. What happened that night in November 1969? Where did Charlene and Lisa go? Are they still alive? If so, where are they? Do they know who they really are? Someone knows something. Whether that person is still alive, whether they'll ever come forward, whether advances in technology will finally provide answers, these are the unknowns that keep this case alive. Every missing person represents a family in pain, questions without answers, a life interrupted or lost. Charlene and Lisa represent all of this, but they're also more than just a case number or a mystery to be solved. They were real children. They had their mother's eyes, their own personalities, their twin bond. They deserve to be remembered as people, not just as a puzzle. If you have any information about this case, no matter how insignificant it might seem, please contact the Metropolitan Police. Information can be provided anonymously. Even small details might be the piece that finally solves this puzzle. If you're someone who was born on March 29, 1966, who is a twin, who has questions about your early childhood or origins, consider exploring your family history. DNA testing is widely available and has solved other historical cases. The story of Charlene Lunnon and Lisa Hoodless is a story of loss, of love that endures, of a mother who never gave up, and of questions that still need answers. Wherever Charlene and Lisa are, whatever happened to them, they deserve to have their story known. They deserve for people to keep asking questions, keep searching for answers, keep hoping that one day, after all these years, the truth will finally come to light. This has been the story of the twins who vanished, a case that remains unsolved after more than half a century, a reminder that some questions haunt us across the decades, and a testament to the enduring power of a mother's love. Thank you for watching, and if you know something, please speak up. It's never too late for the truth.